Imagine spending weeks in space, floating in zero-G. Now you've got to get home. And the trip back? It's probably the most dangerous, most difficult part of the whole mission. We're going to break down the absolutely insane engineering that made this journey of fire and precision possible.
Yeah, a hell-blazing journey. The mission planners weren't kidding around. Think about it. You're trying to pilot a 100-ton glider through a wall of superheated plasma. We're talking about air that's so hot, the molecules are literally torn apart. It's basically a controlled fall, and it pushed engineering to the absolute edge of what anyone thought was possible.
All right, so Section 1, the point of no return. And that's exactly what it is. The whole trip home starts with one single move, and once you make it, well, there's no turning back. No second chances, no let's try that again. You are coming down one way or another.
So how do you actually start this fall? It's this incredibly precise ballet in space. First, the shuttle flips completely over, so it's flying upside down and backwards. Why backwards? Well, because that's the direction you need to fire your engines to slow down. So you fire those engines for just a couple of minutes, and then you flip right back around, pointing the nose up at a 40-degree angle, ready for what's coming next.
And get this, that big dramatic engine burn, it only slows the shuttle down by a measly 1.3%. That's it. It's not like slamming on the brakes, it's just the tiniest little tap to nudge it out of its stable orbit and start it on that long fall back to Earth. It just goes to show you how fine the margins were. Absolutely incredible.
And that precision is absolutely everything. Because you have to hit this target in the sky, this entry flight corridor, and it's a razor-thin window. I mean, think about it. Come in too steep, and the friction just fries you. You burn up. But if you come in too shallow, the atmosphere isn't thick enough to grab you, and you literally bounce off of it like a skipping stone on a lake. Except you're skipping back into deep space with no way to get back. The stakes could not be higher.
Okay, Section 2, surviving the inferno. You've hit the corridor, you're committed. Now the real problem starts. How do you survive? You're screaming into the atmosphere at almost 30 times the speed of sound, creating a fireball that would melt a normal plane in an instant. So, what do you do?
Let's talk about the heat. We're looking at temperatures hitting 1,650 degrees Celsius. To put that in perspective, that is hotter than lava flowing from a volcano. So the big engineering question was, how in the world do you build a vehicle that can take that kind of heat, but also needs to be light enough to fly back down and land like an airplane?
Well, the obvious answer wasn't the right one. You know, before the shuttle, NASA had the X-15, a rocket plane that used this super tough metal called Inconel X. It can handle the heat, no problem. But it was also ridiculously heavy, like 180% heavier than aluminum. And for a vehicle that needs to get all the way to orbit, every single gram counts. So the shuttle had to be built out of lightweight aluminum. And here's the kicker. Aluminum melts at just 177 degrees Fahrenheit. That's almost 10 times less than the heat it was about to fly through. A huge problem.
So, okay, what about the old-school heat shields? You know, the kind that just burn off, called ablative coatings? They tried those on the X-15 and, well, it was a total mess. This stuff was supposed to burn away and carry the heat with it. Instead, it would melt and get smeared all over the cockpit windows, completely blinding the pilots. And if that's not bad enough, they found out it could become explosive if it came into contact with liquid oxygen. Not great for a ship sitting on a massive fuel tank full of the stuff. Oh, and it was a one-and-done deal, not reusable. So yeah, they had to go back to the drawing board.
The first piece of the puzzle was actually pretty clever, and it's all about aerodynamics. See, you might think a super sharp, pointy nose is the way to go. But at these speeds, that just attaches the scorching hot shockwave right to the skin of the vehicle. That's what happened to the experimental HTV-2. It basically melted. The shuttle instead used a blunt, rounded nose. What this does is it creates a shockwave that actually stands off from the body, creating this little buffer zone, this insulating layer of air. It's the first line of defense, pushing that insane heat away from the shuttle's skin.
Section 3 is what I like to call a puzzle of protection, because that air buffer alone wasn't going to cut it, not even close. The real secret, the real magic, was in the skin of the shuttle itself. This was the thermal protection system, and honestly, it was a masterpiece of material science.
Okay, so for the parts that got the absolute hottest, we're talking the nose cap and the front edges of the wings, they needed something special. This was a material called reinforced carbon-carbon, or RCC. The way they made it is wild. They take a weave of carbon fiber and then basically bake it in a vacuum until all the extra stuff, the resin, just burns away. What you're left with is a pure carbon graphite structure, which is incredibly tough and can handle that insane direct heat.
Now, for the rest of the shuttle's body, get ready for this number. It was covered in over 32,000 individual tiles. And here's the crazy part. Almost every single one was a unique shape. They were all individually milled and given their own serial number. It basically turned the orbiter into the most complex and probably most expensive jigsaw puzzle in human history.
And the tiles weren't all the same, which shows just how clever the design was. You had black tiles on the belly and white tiles on the top. Why? It's all about physics, specifically something called Kirchhoff's rule. The black tiles on the bottom were designed to be amazing at radiating heat away from the shuttle during re-entry. On the flip side, the white tiles on top were great reflectors, designed to bounce the sun's heat away and keep the shuttle cool while it was up in orbit. So cool.
So how did they make these things? They'd basically mix up pure silica fibers with water, cast it into big blocks, and then dry them out in a giant microwave. But the result was a true engineering marvel. These tiles were 90% air. Think about that. It's basically a solid sponge of air. This made them unbelievable insulators. There are famous videos where you can see someone heating a tile with a blowtorch until it's glowing red hot, and then immediately picking it up by the corners with their bare hands. Just incredible.
All right, Section 4, Flying Through the Fire. This is it, the climax of the re-entry. All the systems are being pushed to their limit, the shuttle is glowing red hot, it's wrapped in a sheath of plasma, and for now, it's totally on its own.
For 12 long, agonizing minutes, that cocoon of plasma around the orbiter gets so dense that it completely blocks all radio signals. No contact in, no contact out. This was the famous communications blackout. For 12 minutes, the crew and the onboard computers were flying blind, completely cut off from mission control. Can you imagine?
So here's a weird puzzle for you. You're trying to steer this thing, right? But to survive, you have to keep the nose pitched up at that 40-degree angle to keep the heat on the tiles. So how do you steer? You can't just point your nose where you want to go, because if you drop that nose, you burn up. What's the solution?
The answer is completely counterintuitive. You don't pitch the nose down, you bank hard. The shuttle would roll from side to side, sometimes at a crazy 70-degree angle. By doing this, you're essentially turning your lift factor from an up force into a sideways force. This is how they could steer it left and right, covering hundreds of kilometers of cross range, all without ever dropping the nose into that deadly heat.
And what did that feel like from the cockpit? The astronauts described it as a series of huge, sweeping S-turns, basically skidding sideways through the upper atmosphere at thousands of miles per hour. It's been called the fastest drift in history. I mean, just picture that.
And that brings us to our final section, the ultimate falling brick. Once the shuttle has bled off all that speed and heat, once it's through the fire, it becomes something else entirely. The plasma is gone, it's flying slower than the speed of sound, and now it's a glider. A very, very big, very sophisticated, and very, very hard to fly glider.
You know when you're on a commercial flight and you're landing? You're on a nice, gentle 3-degree glide slope. It's pretty calm. The space shuttle? It came down at a staggering 20-degree angle. It was basically dropping out of the sky. We're talking 7 times steeper and 20 times faster than an airliner. This is exactly why it earned its nickname, the Flying Brick. It had the glide ratio of, well, a brick.
So you've survived re-entry. You've somehow managed to fly this brick to the runway. Now you have to stop it. And you're hitting the tarmac at over 360 kilometers an hour. So stopping a 100-ton glider with no engine power is a challenge in itself. It took a 3-part system. First, this really cool split rudder on the tail would open up like a giant air brake. Then you've got powerful carbon brakes in the wheels. And for the grand finale, a massive drag chute would literally be fired out the back with an explosive charge to finally wrestle the thing to a stop.
Which really brings us to the big question at the end of all this. The Space Shuttle's re-entry was, without a doubt, an absolute marvel of engineering. A dance of fire and precision that we've never seen before or since. But when you look back at just how mind-bogglingly complex it all was, you have to wonder, was it a brilliant, reusable masterpiece that truly pushed what we were capable of? Or was it a dangerously complex compromise, a vehicle that was trying to be a rocket, a spaceship, and an airplane all at once? And that's the complicated question the shuttle leaves us with.